Welcome to the Space Race Report.
Humans have been fascinated with the moon since they had just come into existence.
Past, the US and the Soviet Union have had the space race, a competition in which they competed to see which country could land the first man on the moon. The United States was falling tremendously behind when John F. Kennedy made it his primary goal to land the first man on the moon. The United States ended up winning the space race when they landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon.
In the 50s, all space suits were single-pieced. At that time, the suits were made out of 6 layers of thick nylon. They also had airphones and microphones in the 50s. Each space suit had 2 oxygen tanks in the back. Scientists were not able to spend much time on the medical needs.
In the 50s, spaceships were just starting to become more popular. Some spaceships had 2 lower wings and 2 upper wings. Another ship design is a circular spaceship. Some spaceships had wings on the bottom of the ship like the moonship and the Disney satellite.
In the 60s, the space race was in full swing. John F. Kennedy had just set the moon as NASA's primary goal. The rockets were beginning to be launched off of launching pads, like the Mercury and Gemini ships. Later, they began building a crawler transporter way to carry the enormous moon-bound rockets. In the 1960s, the Apollo missions began. Larger rockets began being created, like the Saturn V. In 1969, the first man set foot on the moon. The 1960s meant the start of spacewalks. When on the spacewalk, astronauts use safety tethers to stay close to their spacecraft. The safety tethers keep astronauts from floating away into space. Astronauts also use tethers to keep tools from floating away. On a spacewalk, astronauts wear a safer. If an astronaut were to become untethered and float away, safer would help him or her fly back to the spacecraft safely using a joystick.
In the late 70s, the Apollo program was finished. When an Apollo spacecraft was blasting off, it looked like a spaceship without wings, and once they landed on the moon they were shaped like a cone with its point cut off. In the 1980s, NASA's primary focus shifted from human spaceflight to building a space shuttle. Its purpose was to be a reusable low-Earth orbital spacecraft.
Used between 1968 and 1975, the Apollo spacesuits provided greater maneuverability. They were lightweight and comfortable for the astronauts on the lunar surface. They featured the famous fishbowl helmet, which allowed for wide, unrestricted views, and a 3-layer liquid cooling and ventilation garment that circulated cold water to prevent an astronaut from sweating too much and fogging up his faceplate.
1980 marked the creation of the first tetherless spacewalk. Also, in 1980 the ILC Dover was in full use. That company also made spacesuits to protect users of liquid rocket fuel. In the 80s and 90s, scientists began using the blue Boeing suit. They were designed to be less bulky and more compatible to the astronaut. The astronauts aboard the CST-100 Starliner spacecraft will be wearing these suits again in 2018.
In the 90s, the Space Shuttle Endeavour made its debut in space on May 7, 1992. The record-setting mission included 4 spacewalks, including the first by 3 astronauts. It was also the first shuttle mission requiring 3 rendezvous with an orbiting spacecraft, and the first use of a drag chute during a shuttle landing. In the 90s, people started working on going to Mars.
After a little bit, NASA's focus shifted to the International Space Station. It is where scientists and astronauts collect data and information about space. The ship is also used as a science lab and to find out how human biology is in space rather than Earth. Many other countries worked together to build it so that they can all use it. The space station is located about 220 miles above Earth, and it rotates around the Earth.
But what will it all look like in the future? Scientists believe that there are many new and coming possibilities for powering spaceships. 3 of them are nickel-hydrogen batteries, radioisotope thermoelectric generators, and hydrogen-oxygen fuel cells.
NASA is currently developing its next-generation spacesuits, intended for journeys to an asteroid, Mars, or back to the moon. They have a hard upper torso made from graphite elements and soft fabric joints at the knees and elbows. It is more maneuverable than ever. Many ideas have been suggested for the next suit. Some think it will be a black armor or a leader-up version of normal space suit, or just robots.
Thank you for listening to the Space Race Report. Stay tuned. Next week we are talking about Orion, a spacecraft which will soon go to Mars.